Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. My name is Christopher Shepard. Thank you all for tuning in. Just a fair word of warning, this will be our last show of the week here on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, and we're going to be taking a little bit of a Thanksgiving hiatus. I wish you a happy Thanksgiving to you and yours in advance, but we should have a great show to get you prepared for this holiday weekend, starting off by previewing all three of the, shall we say, bizarre Thanksgiving games. A couple of those I think are going to be more exciting than others. Then I'm going to be previewing the rivalry week of college football. Always a fantastic week, but now with a lot more playoff seeding, CFP implications, conference championship game implications, and what have you. Then I'm going to be making my picks for some of the other games during this holiday weekend, concluding my positional rankings with the tight ends this time around. I wanted to save my best weekly Shadow Report segment for last instead of, continuing on with my defense and special teams rankings. And as always, to conclude, I will do, like I just said, my weekly Shadow Report. But before we get into any of that exciting stuff, if you want to follow along with the show, subscribe to the network. As Tap to Learn also says thank you, same to you and yours. Even though he is my father, he can't hide for that long. Happy Thanksgiving to you. And so, before we get into any of all of our talk here today, I do want to remind you, as I was getting into, to like, follow, and subscribe to the show and the network if you want more content such as this. But if you want to contribute like Tap to Learn has done already, more directly to the show, make yourselves available to the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube. A great way to contribute and interact with the show. You can do it on our website as well, gsmcpodcast.net, if you are not necessarily familiar perhaps with YouTube settings or what have you. But either way, it is greatly appreciated from all those concerned with the shows we do here at the network and the network itself. It just makes the show that much better as well, and we thank you for it in advance. But without further ado, let us jump into our first segment of the day, starting off here with this very interesting slate of tomorrow in terms of NFL games on Thanksgiving Day. We have very mixed reactions to some of these games throughout the public eye, but nevertheless, it's Thanksgiving. It should be a fun affair no matter where you are in the world, and it's just something that reminds us, no matter how bad the football might be, of the holiday itself and what we are thankful for. So without further ado, just going to do a quick rundown, a little bit of a snapshot of each of these games, because we have three instead of one, and it's a lot to go over. But each of them deserves in their own right a certain little storyline to them. Starting off with the earliest game here in the slate, the Bears-Lions, the one that feels the most traditional, as the Lions feel like the Thanksgiving team. They play the most times, I believe, out of any team on the holiday. They are 10.5-point favorites at home, but in recent years, they haven't necessarily been good at home on the holiday, and so this one could be an opportunity for the Bears to steal a victory here, even though it's looking less and less likely, because the Lions are the best team in the NFL, and the Bears continue to shoot themselves in the foot more often than not. Had an opportunity a couple of weeks ago against Washington. All they had to do to get to 5-2 was defend a Hail Mary, and they failed at that, and now they sit at 4-7, having lost their last 5. And the Lions roll in looking like the best team in the NFL, although they didn't necessarily look like a well-oiled machine against Indy, even though that's a tough place, a tough team to play at this time of year. But I still think Detroit's going to get it done. The over-under is 48.5. I think that Detroit could hit the over there if they stockpile points, even though I have to give credit to what Chicago's defense has done this year. Very well-rounded on the defensive side of the football. But overall, Detroit should do enough to carry this one out. Even though, the home record's a little bit shaky, and anything can happen on a holiday, I feel like this is a team that is going to have Super Bowl aspirations. They feel like they are going to be the last team standing at the end of the year, as Tap to Learn agrees with the sentiment by saying Lions roar, Bears hibernate early. And I feel like that pretty much sums up some people's view of this game, because a lot of people feel like the Lions will dominate, but I want to give the Bears a little bit of benefit of the doubt. I do think that they'll have the ability to cover, but in potentially a very weird way where they're playing catch up more so than keeping it close, because that's where, I feel like the Bears will try and chip away at the Lions there at the end. But overall, this should be a comprehensive Lions victory. Then for potentially the snooze fest out of the 3 games, Tommy DeVito versus Cooper Rush. It's Giants versus Cowboys. And we have to talk about this game, unfortunately. But if you are a Giants or Cowboys fan, no threats for you here, because I actually think this could be a weirdly entertaining game. Maybe not for the many reasons other people think it will be a bad game, but I do think that in some ways these two messy teams will combine to create something that amounts to a fun spectacle on the football field. Let's just put it that way. Dallas are somehow 3.5-point favorites, as Tap to Learn says Bears need turnovers and flukes of that last game, and I agree with that as well. The Bears need all they can get in that one, and if they get it, the potential of this game is closer than we might think. But I do think that towards the end of the game, the Lions might take their foot off the gas, and so that's where I think the closeness and separation between these two teams won't look that necessarily, surprising on paper. But moving on to the Giants-Cowboys game, I think, Dallas is the deserved favorite. I'm not entirely sure, because the Giants are, no matter how messy, still a team that has talent within it. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to who makes less mistakes. And not for nothing, Cooper Rush is coming off perhaps his best game as a Dallas Cowboy. Even in that 6-game stint he had a couple of years ago when Dak went down, this was perhaps his best game out of that entire bunch. And so that's why I feel like right now the Cowboys are still a team that believes that they can pull out games like this. They're not going to compete against the NFC or AFC's elite anytime soon, but this should be a game they should feel they should win. Well, that's the Giants side of things. It's more so damage control. It's not necessarily going to be a pretty product that you're putting out on the field, but you're trying to limit the damage. You're trying to play for pride in some games. Maybe you are tanking for a guy like Shedeur Sanders or a guy like Cam Ward, but at least this is going to be about going out there on Thanksgiving and putting a decent at best product out there on the field for your fans to appreciate. Needless to say, though, a lot of casual, neutral NFL fans, so to speak, probably might be sleeping through this one, because it's definitely not the most entertaining of games. That being said, I gotta go with the Cowboys here, just because they feel like the better team in this matchup, but it could honestly go either way, just because both of these teams right now are in pretty terrible situations. And then last but not least, the game that I feel has the most chance out of all of these games to be the best of the day, the concluding one of the day, Dolphins-Packers. Green Bay a 3-point favorite, although we're going to see in latter segments here, I do think the Dolphins are an interesting opponent here. The Dolphins have a lot of momentum. They feel they're right in the thick of the AFC playoff picture, gunning for that wild card spot, and they're amongst teams, most importantly, that haven't necessarily been in this position before. This is the first time the Broncos have been relevant, and it's the first time, the Colts with Anthony Richardson are in this position as well. So the pressure's more on them. Whereas the Dolphins know what they need to do. They have one of the easier schedules out of all of those AFC playoff hopefuls. And this is the only really test, as Almighty Finesse enters the chat, is the only real test that I feel the Dolphins will have to pass. And I think they do. I think this is a very, very winnable game for this Dolphins team with the way they've been playing. I look at all the weapons they have. You see Tyreek Hill, he's still a number one option. As Almighty Finesse said, DJ Moore went off last week and told me to start you on. I did not predict DJ Moore to play as well as he did, but sometimes I'm wrong here on the show, and I'll roll with the punches here. But it was up to me. I felt like that was the better matchup. But overall, I hope it all was well in your fantasy week. And I also want to address a comment from Tap to Learn as well about the Giants-Cowboys game. The winner loses in the draft race at the bottom. Dable's hot seat is getting hotter and hotter. I agree with that as well. I feel like, this is it for Brian Dable. Might be his last stand, and so he has to go out with a bang. But going back to this Dolphins-Packers game here, I feel like the Dolphins have an offense capable of overwhelming this Packers defense. I'm trying to make sure that I'm giving all these offenses the benefit of the doubt when going up against the Packers, because I really don't think that Packers defense is as good as people think. I think that they predicate themselves on taking the ball away, and that's a risky approach. And eventually, a team like the Dolphins, where you have so many different weapons to utilize, both in the ground game and through the air, you're going to get got. And I feel like this is the potential kind of trap game the Packers don't want. On Thanksgiving, the last game of the day, and the Dolphins are coming in red hot, playing with a lot of fire now that Tua's back, and really looking to go on that playoff run. And so that's why I feel like this is the kind of game where the Packers might slip up. They're honestly not necessarily looking that good right now, and thus far I feel like the Packers are one of the NFC contenders, quote unquote, that feel the most vulnerable right now. They feel like they're a team that's playing with fire a little bit too much. And eventually, when you play with fire, you get burned. And so that's why I feel like the Dolphins are a team right now coming in hot that can really overwhelm this Packers defense, unlike any offense that has tried thus far this season. But let me know what you think in the comments about all three of these games. Very intriguing games, no matter how good or bad they look on paper. But coming up after this short break, we transition over to the world of college football. Rivalry week. A lot of implications to go over and a lot of games that could tell us a lot about different teams. We'll be right back after this short break to talk about it.